With SRN News, I'm Patrick Foss. The special counsel investigating Russian election meddling and obstruction of justice has given President Trump's lawyers a list of almost 4 dozen questions. Former federal prosecutor David Weinstein says it wouldn't be a good idea for Mr. Trump.
The president has shown that he's a person who doesn't like to follow direction. He tends to go off tangent on answers that he's given. And people who answer questions like that often find themselves digging themselves into a very deep hole, one they can't get out of.
Weinstein says he thinks someone on Trump's legal team may have leaked the questions.
It seems to me that it's a way to create support for the argument that the president and his legal team have made that this is a witch hunt by both the Special Prosecutor's Office and the Department of Justice.
Special counsel Robert Mueller raised the prospect of issuing a grand jury subpoena to compel the president to testify as part of the Russia probe. Also at SRNews.com, the White House says President Trump's former bodyguard did nothing out of the ordinary when he took possession of the president's medical records.
Donald Trump's longtime personal doctor, Harold Bornstein, says it felt like a raid when the president's former bodyguard and 2 others showed up at his office in February 2017. But White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders defended the move.
As is standard operating procedure for a new president, the White House medical unit took possession of the president's medical records.
The incident took place last year, 2 days after Bornstein divulged that he had prescribed the president a drug to combat hair loss in men. Greg Clugston, the White House.
California Governor Jerry Brown says his state and 16 others are suing the Trump administration over its plans to scrap vehicle mileage standards and how much greenhouse gases vehicles can emit.
If we follow the Pruitt-Trump path, we follow our way off the cliff to disaster. So we have to stop it.
The lawsuit also alleges the rollback violates the Clean Air Act. This is SRN News. Josh McDowell spoke at the Leadership Vistas International Ministry fundraiser in North Dallas last month. I asked him the story of his conversion in college.
I was what you might call an ornery agnostic. I could put down the believers. When I went to university, I was wounded. I was hurt. I'd been homosexually raped for 7 years. My father was a town alcoholic. And when I went to university, I was angry at God, at my father, and at the church. Even though I didn't go to church, I blamed the church. Because where was God when I was hurting?
And one day, Josh asked a woman at the college,
"Why are your lives so different?" She just looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ." I said, "Oh, for God's sakes, don't give me that garbage." All I know is they challenged me to intellectually examine it, and I did it to refute them. Set out to write evidence demands a verdict against Christianity, became a Christian, spent 13 years documenting why it's true, and haven't stopped since.
Tomorrow, Josh talks about his famous book, More Than a Carpenter. This is SRN News. Justice Anthony Kennedy once again has Washington in his thrall.
Liberals are worried the 81-year-old justice will retire this spring. Conservatives hope he does retire so President Trump has a chance to appoint a more conservative justice. The slim Republican Senate majority would likely confirm a Trump nominee. There are no outward signs that Kennedy's planning to step down. He's hired his law clerks for next term and plans his regular summer teaching trip to Austria. But that hasn't stopped liberals from worrying publicly that the justice in the middle of an otherwise divided court might decide to call it quits and hand Mr. Trump a second high court vacancy. Mr. Trump put Justice Neil Gorsuch on the court last year. Keith Peters, Washington.
Arizona teachers said they will end a historic statewide strike Thursday that shut down schools for days if lawmakers pass a plan that offers big raises and increased school funding, but that still falls short of their demands. This is SRN News.
USA Radio News.
You can count former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice as one of the folks who says if we leave the Iran nuclear agreement, it isn't going to be that much of a big deal. The former Secretary of State joined Fox and Friends and explained why she's not a big fan of the current deal.
My concern about the nuclear deal had been the verification regime. If anything, this just makes it even more clear that you can't have a verification regime that gives the Iranians weeks to clean up a site.
A lengthy list of questions for President Donald Trump from Special special counsel Robert Mueller was leaked to the New York Times, marking the latest string of apparently deliberate disclosures relating to the ongoing probe into the Russian involvement into the 2016 presidential election. Many of the nearly 50 questions for President Trump focused on obstruction. Now, the president, of course, had a reaction today where he sent out a tweet saying that this was disgraceful that this information was leaked, and he once again called the investigation a witch hunt. This is USA Radio News. A study finds differences in how black and white heart failure patients are being treated. USA Radio Network's Chris Barnes has the details.
This new study reports that African Americans suffering from heart failure are less likely than white patients to get care from a heart specialist. Earlier research showing care overseen by a cardiologist does improve survival rates for heart failure patients. The new study by researchers at the University of Arizona found white patients are 40% more likely than blacks to get primary care from a cardiologist. The doctor who directed the study says bias in clinical decision-making often leads to unequal treatment for racial and ethnic minorities. For USA Radio News, I'm Chris Barnes.
Ashley Judd is suing Harvey Weinstein, and she said she wants the former movie mogul to be held accountable for illegal conduct that caused her to lose money, status, prestige, and power. Judd was one of the first women to come forward as part of the Me Too movement against Weinstein. This is USA Radio News. Today on this date, back in 2011, President Barack Obama announced the death of Osama bin Laden during a U.S. commando operation. Rob O'Neill is the person who shot bin Laden. He explains what happened in the moments before the raid.
We even sort of joked about what was going to happen. Is bin Laden going to get in some emergency ladder or slide and end up in the alley, and then someone outside with the machine gun is going to get him? And we would joke about it. It was never going to be me. I mean, I was never going to be a part of the mission. He was a ghost. And just to get to that spot delivered by the pilots, like I said, and to get into that position in the last room because of my teammates in front of me. And I remember watching them in the house just so brave. They knew the house should blow up around them at any moment, but they just kept their tactics, escalating the force, slow as smooth, smooth as fast. And I was just proud of them. And then all of a sudden I'm in a spot where I turn a corner after I saw pretty much the bravest act of heroism I've ever seen when the point man jumped on the suicide bombers. I turned the right based on the way he went, and there was bin Laden standing there about 3 feet away. And it was just, I saw him, I recognized him, that's his nose, he's not surrendering, he's a threat, he's a suicide bomber, he needs to be addressed as such, so that's why I needed to shoot him in the head.
O'Neill then discusses the moments shortly thereafter, the killing of bin Laden.
Powers that be and the law enforcement, the three-letter agencies were doing DNA tests, taking the photos that apparently I think need to be released. And we were having breakfast and we're watching, actually Fox News was on, and we're watching it when he said Osama bin Laden. I looked at Osama bin Laden, and it was a very surreal night. You know, how did a kid from Montana who could barely swim become a Navy SEAL and end up right here at this moment?
For USA Radio News, I'm Tim Berg.
Arizona teacher strike. I'm Tim McGuire with an AP News Minute. The Arizona State Legislature could pass a state budget proposal that would give teachers a 10% pay raise this year and start restoring nearly $400 million in spending cuts put into place during the recession. Striking teachers say they will go back to class on Thursday if the measure passes. The governor has promised 20% in raises by 2020. President Trump denouncing the apparent leak of some 4 questions Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team allegedly wants to ask of the president in connection with the Russia investigation. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders telling reporters today the administration has nothing to say about the story.
Once again, I'm not going to get into a back and forth about questions leaked or anything having to do with the special counsel, and I would refer you to the president's attorneys.
The New York Times, which first reported on the leak, says the list was compiled by the president's lawyers during a meeting with Mueller's team about a possible Trump interview. I'm Tim McGuire.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Karen Howerlock. CBC News has learned a parliamentary investigation into the behavior of an NDP MP has found multiple complaints of harassment against him. And now Aaron Weir, a rookie MP from Saskatchewan, is speaking out. Catherine Cullen has the story.
It started when a fellow MP sent out an email making allegations that Weir had harassed women, but not her. So the NDP called in a third-party investigator, so independent that even Jagmeet Singh and his staff don't know who is making the allegations. But CBC News has spoken to one complainant. She says Weir was angry and belligerent when he spoke to her and that she felt physically intimidated. Weir thinks he knows who she is and says this is all about a debate over policy.
I did have a somewhat tense discussion with her, but I certainly did not display any anger or belligerence.
Mr. Singh.
Singh wouldn't comment on the report today. The findings of the investigation that do not breach confidentiality will be released, but no word on when.
Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
MPs have voted overwhelmingly to ask the Vatican for an apology. They want Pope Francis to apologize in person to Indigenous peoples for decades of abuse in residential schools.
Yeas pour 269, 269. Nays called 10.
I declare the motion carried.
The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops has previously said Francis felt sadness about what happened but would not personally apologize. The Catholic Church ran more than 70% of residential schools in Canada. Well, U.S. media are reporting special counsel Robert Mueller warned Donald Trump's lawyers in March he could subpoena Trump to appear before a grand jury. The information comes from John Dowd, who recently resigned as Trump's attorney. Mueller's looking into Russian meddling in the election and is investigating Trump for possible obstruction of justice. It's believed to be the first time Mueller has threatened to force the president to testify. Well, just weeks after apologizing for sharing millions of users' information with a data mining company, Facebook is hoping you will trust it again for love. That's according to CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Jacqueline Hansen has details.
We are announcing a new set of features coming soon around dating.
Despite the cloud of controversy still hanging over his company, Mark Zuckerberg wants to play matchmaker.
A Facebook dating profile would differ from the standard profile in one big way. Current friends won't see it. Users will only be matched up with non-friends. And seeing as Facebook is sitting on a mountain of user data, it likely has much of the information it needs to do that.
But some young people are questioning whether they want to share any more of their life with Facebook.
No, don't trust Facebook at all.
While trust is the foundation of a successful relationship, it will be necessary for Facebook's dating plans as well. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is reviewing a proposal from Canada to change the Safe Third Country Agreement. It requires migrants to make their claims in the first safe country they arrive in, but only applies at official border crossings. However, hundreds are crossing into Canada at unofficial border points. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale says the two countries are talking.
It's a discussion that we're having with the Americans about the various techniques that could be pursued on both sides of the border to ensure security and integrity. But this is very exploratory at the moment, scoping issues and potential solutions.
And still in Ottawa, 7 MPs who quit the Bloc Québécois earlier this year say they might start their own federal party. They resigned in February, saying they don't agree with Martine Ouellette's leadership and her focus on independence. The MPs say they'll meet with Quebecers in the coming weeks to present a proposal. And that is your World This Hour. I'm Karen Howrlock.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
NBA playoffs in progress right now. Minute 47 to go in the fourth quarter. The Warriors lead the Pelicans 119-106 as Golden State looks to take a 2-0 lead in the series. Stephen Curry returning to action for the first time in over 5 weeks. He scored 28 points in 25 minutes. Earlier, the layoff for the Toronto Raptors wasn't much. The Cavaliers had a quick turnaround, and perhaps that's the reason why Toronto jumped out to a 14-point first quarter lead, but LeBron James and company would not go quietly.
The Cavaliers have the ball with 40 seconds remaining. They trail 105-103. They have trailed all night. LeBron, he dribbles to the right elbow, guarded by Anunoby. 10 to shoot, 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. LeBron, turnaround jumper. He ties this game at 105. LeBron James with 30 seconds remaining knocks it down from the right wing side.
On the Cavaliers Radio Network, the game would head to overtime where Cleveland would pull off the 113-112 win, stealing Game 1 from the Raptors. LeBron finished with 26 points, 13 assists, and 11 rebounds for his 21st career postseason triple-double. Game 2 on Thursday. Stanley Cup playoffs, Alex Ovechkin's goal with just over a minute remaining gave the Capitals a 4-3 win over the Penguins as DC takes a 2-1 series lead. Winnipeg going up 2-1 over Nashville after their 7-4 victory. 2 baseball games still in progress. Bottom of the 9th inning in Anaheim, the Angels and Orioles are tied at 2. Bottom of the 8th in Seattle, Mariners with a 5-3 lead over the A's. Finals from earlier, a couple of extra inning games. Royals edged the Red Sox in 13, 7-6. In 12 innings, the Rangers topped the Indians 8-6. Marlins a 2-1 walk-off win over the Phillies in 10. Also in 10, Blue Jays beat the Twins 7-4. Get your full scoreboard at NBCSportsRadio.com. I'm Scott Seidenberg, NBC Sports Radio.